Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth seminar in the LaunchPad Bootcamp program, this week focusing on communicating EdTech efficacy in marketing. Hope you've all enjoyed the break since the first three sessions, which we held mid-July, and welcome back to the second half of the program. I would argue that these next three sessions will be even more valuable for you all, touching on some very, very important aspects of cultivating a strong EdTech startup. I would like to welcome everyone tuning in today. Welcome to all the LaunchPad attendees in Zoom. We are delighted to host you once again in our Bootcamp program. I would also like to give a special welcome to those watching the in-conversation of today's program online in our live stream. Now, before we begin, it's my honor to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. Whilst we are dispersed across many traditional lands, we are connected virtually. I'm coming to you from the unceded lands of the Boonwurrung, Boon Wurrung, and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nations. I acknowledge the continuous and unbroken custodianship of the land, waters, and culture of this country, and thank their elders past and present and emerging for allowing us to gather here today. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples with us here today. So today's program is the fourth in a series of 6 meetings that will connect you all with a network of experienced entrepreneurs, investors, educators with the tools and insight to grow your business. For the first portion of today's session, we'll facilitate a conversation with our wonderful guest speakers, Shrilesh Pillai, Christine Chomp, and Lee Kolan, who will dive into the role and importance of marketing in the EdTech sector. Now, one more thing before we dive into our conversation. EduGrowth programs like these are only possible through great partnerships. EduGrowth is delighted to have partnership with Amazon Web Services to bring the 2022 LaunchPad Bootcamp program to you all. I would like to thank Amazon Web Services and their team, including Mohammed Ziadun and Camille Torabuli, for their long-standing partnership and collaboration with EduGrowth. To learn more about the benefits of partnering with Amazon Web Services EdStart and to apply to become an Amazon Web Services EdStart member, please use the link that'll be dropped in the chat now for you all, so you can access their services. Now, I'm delighted to introduce today's guests and then promptly move into discussion. So I'll start off by introducing the facilitator for this discussion, Shrilesh Pillai, who I'll then pass the baton to introduce our following 2 guest speakers and then just dive straight into discussion. So Shrilesh is establishing Lead Squared as a pillar of marketing automation and CRM for businesses in APAC. He has a curious mindset and eagerness to experiment, driving his accomplishments all throughout the marketing sector. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, Shrilesh, to our conversation today.
Thank you, Jonathan. My pleasure being here. I see all our speakers have glasses, so anyway. I'm most happy to introduce you to Christine. She doesn't mind being called Chris. So Chris is a marketing professional of over 20 years experience in competitive, dynamic, and high growth B2B and B2C environments. Now, folks, I think this is a very great set of individuals we have here who are going to be sharing. The way I look at it is they've got experience both in the business as well as consumer marketing. So I'm actually looking forward to learning a thing or two here. So Chris manages marketing for Edelex on a mission to service learning outcomes, digital assets, and the power of individual achievement. Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Leah is another very capable commercial marketer who heads marketing at Schoolbox. She is an effective communicator with over 20 years of experience in consumer and business marketing. She leads marketing for Schoolbox to connect school communities and empower learning. Thank you, Leah, for making it.
Lovely to be here.
So as we get started, I think it would be good for the audience to know a bit about us, and maybe if I could please request, if there were a few big muscles you had in terms of specializations, please feel free to share. Can I start with you first, Chris?
Sure, absolutely. So I've, as you say, 20 years experience in marketing. Most of that has been in education, and most of it for the last 10 years or so has been in new product development and launch to market, and specifically around EdTech products. I've worked more often with larger organizations, but as a smaller unit within that organization. So having to wear the many hats, going into new markets with a new product. So having to differentiate both the brand and the product itself, and then do that across a number of education sectors. So I started out in professional development, went on to TAFE, and now work in higher ed and across a wider spectrum as time goes on as well.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. So everything's in education. So you probably, even from a student onwards, you've seen the consumer side of being a consumer, and then also marketing to the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is an important aspect of marketing that sometimes in the B2B space we forget. And in education especially, there's this unique dynamic where our clients might be the schools, but the eventual client is the learner. And so you're always having to consider multiple endpoints for the product and where it wants to go.
I can already see this turning out to be a really detailed discussion. Thank you, Chris. Leah, yourself, please.
So I've got a little bit of a different background. I'm what you'd call a true marketing generalist. So I've come from, I guess I started off in consumer goods and FMCG and pharmaceutical marketing, direct to consumer through retail outlets. So really, really different. However, you know, over the course of the last few years, I've moved more into a B2B environment and spent quite a lot of years within not-for-profit and also education. So I've worked in organisations that deliver content and content creation, lesson planning for teachers for direct use in schools, right through to, you know, RTO organisations looking at higher ed, apprenticeships, working with the government, and now in a tech environment within education as well. So I think it's that diverse experience which actually then adds a fresh perspective and value into an EdTech company.
Very much.
So a bit different.
Different, but very good. I'm always envious of marketers who have the millions of dollars of budget in the consumer world. Yeah.
Yes. Very different.
Very different. But then when you're suddenly brought into this space, you're able to quickly choose the best that worked there into here.
100%. And do you know what the thing I find, Shri, and we'll touch on this, I think, as we go through the questions, is that even though the worlds are different, and you know, I spent a good 10 years in that world, but even though the worlds are different, the principles are the same. And a lot of the conversations we're going to have today, even though they might apply within an EdTech world, the skills and the principles and the understanding you need to market and communicate and build a business are very, very similar.
So
yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. That education is its own unique bird, but marketing is marketing. And so if you have those principles down, then they can be applied and modified to fit.
Yeah.
Good segue, I think.
Did you like that? I was trying there.
What is that one thing that's so common, and that is the customer, right? So let's actually, before we get into those questions, just for the benefit of the audience, so we're going to have a few questions between us. Broadly, you could categorize into understanding your customer, positioning your offering. We'll go about, you know, sharing a few pitfalls in marketing, especially in early teams. And then what we'll do is we'll pick on a discussion involving, you know, how do you build your teams and processes from wherever you are, and then break up into open Q&A. So we'll start with that, you know, with the Bible, really. So understanding your customer. So Chris, can we start with yourself, right? So what advice do you have for founders looking to know their customer? Maybe if you could outline how these startups can understand their customer identity.
Absolutely. I might just backtrack a little bit, though, in the sense that before you start sort of looking at your customer in depth, you really have to understand your own brand, especially as to how you're going to communicate with the your customers about that. But targeting is so important. The scattergun approach, I assure you, does not work. Blasting it out there to everyone and sundry is not a good strategy, not a successful one. Far better is to develop ideal client personas and buyer personas, where you actually think through who are the people that are my decision makers, who are the people that are my influencers, and then develop a detailed overview of what they look like. So for an ideal client profile and for the buyer personas, you're not necessarily, you are dealing in generalizations, let's say, and especially when you're just starting out, that may be hard for you to do, in the sense that you're not coming from an evidence base. You don't have a large data set that you can work with to go, well, this is who we are. This is who our customer is. So when you're starting off, you do have to sort of deal in generalities. So for example, in education, what specific department are you relevant to? Is there a certain size of business that you need to target? Are you more attracted to the research universities, or more student-focused universities? Are you and then thinking through that further, when you have identified that department and what size sort of organization that you're looking at, then looking at the individuals within that. What do they specifically look like? How many years experience do they typically have? What's their background? This will all help you to understand and then craft a message that will resonate with those people that you've identified. And that may change over time. Especially when you're starting out, you may think that you appeal to one, and then as you get more evidence under your belt, then that may need to be refined.
Oh no, Chris, bad habits die hard. So I'm just going and typing out notes, and then I realize, okay, but still, I think it's still good. I've just put a bit of what hit me, into the chat. Let's not, lose any heat on this topic. Pia, could you also add on?
Do you know what? I think everything that Christine is talking about is 100% right, and creating those personas and really being, thinking through what role do they play and how they influence your purchase activity, or, are they a purchaser? Are they a decision maker? Are they an influencer? So for Schoolbox, for instance, we have, we're quite a high involvement product. And so when a school makes a choice to bring Schoolbox into the school, there's a combination of a principal, a business manager, and an IT person who might be the decision makers in the process. But then there's also, head of departments. There's a whole group of people who will influence those decisions and influence what a school goes with, and how they then, make that work in their own environment. So the more complex you are, the more influences, the more involved that you need to be in those different personas, and understanding how to talk and what messages are going to resonate with each group. So one of the things I was going to say, Christine, and I am all for desk research, and I am all for, really understanding the data, understanding the numbers, and using that to influence your decisions. But I think it's also important, especially at this stage with a lot of startups, that they don't forget to get out from behind the desk and have the conversation.
Yeah.
And that they actually, go out and talk to people. So who is it that you think that your, buyer will be? And then go and have a conversation and find those resources and engage with them and see what's making them tick, and see if what you think you're saying is actually what they're hearing. Because that's probably the single most important thing I could say for all startups that I've worked in, is that there's such a passion from the person who's created a product or an idea or a service, and and they understand that through every element of it. But when they try and explain it, their language doesn't necessarily match the person on the other end, and so you need to have those in-person connections to be able to actually make sure that your language is resonating with your buyer's language.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. The power of personal relationships, and especially when you're talking about, a smaller group, maybe just the founder or one other, then yeah, the power of those relationships to give you that insight. So yeah, absolutely agree.
I think we've had this question that's also been there. So by the way, here's an admission. I'm also working something of a startup myself. So whatever you're saying, I guess that's why I'm putting in notes, right? But anyway, so here's the question, right? So I'm preparing this offering. Okay, I think this is the group that it would entice interest and they'd be able to use. Okay. And Chris, Leah, you both say map them out, the different personas. So here's the question, right? So how many personas do you think an early stage edtech startup should consider?
Oof.
So I'll take a stab at that if you like, we.
You go for it.
Yeah. So there's no set number, obviously. Again, to Lee's point, it depends on how complex your offering is as to how many people you need to reach. But as a baseline, number one is the decision maker, the ultimate decision maker. And seconded to that is going to be the executive. There is very little that gets done in education without some executive support. And that can happen both ways, either from the ground up. So someone within a department that recognizes a need, that wants to run a pilot and has to take that up the line, or that the executive gets on board and then feeds that down the line to the department, whoever's in the department to actually go and do this. So at a minimum, you've got two. And I would build from there. I think IT is another one, especially because we are talking EdTech. The situation with education now as an industry is that the data is not great. There's a lot of privacy concerns for the students, for the university as well. So there's a lot of ducks that you need to get in the row from an IT perspective. So you're up to 3. I think that would be a good place to start. And, as mentioned before, the learner, how does this affect the learner? You're not marketing directly to them, but you do have to understand what that learner looks like and what's important to them. Because if you're going out there and selling your solution, you have to demonstrate how this is going to improve the learner's lives in whatever way.
Leah, you had
Sorry, what was that?
What do you reckon?
I'm sitting here nodding. Can you tell? No, 100% agree. And that learner journey is really important, because they may not be your buyer or your decision maker, but all of the people that are influencing a decision within EdTech, whether they are teaching staff right through to the executive, depending on your product or service you're offering, will be motivated by the outcomes of the learner. So it's one of those unique environments, in healthcare, when motivated by a person getting well or, having a good health outcome. And in education, it's very much about the outcomes of the learners. So no matter what your product, I think it's really important to keep that in mind, Christine. So excellent point.
Lovely. I just put it in there. I was just evaluating myself. Do I put IT as number 3, or do I put the learner as number 3, right? And I'm going, let's just have 4 minimum personas, right? So
yeah, I'd go with 4, because each of those is important. The level of depth that you might go into is going to vary, obviously. Your most direct influencer that you're trying to reach. IT might not be until further down in the sales cycle. First, you've got to get their attention. So you have to know who that is so that you can reach out to them and speak with them in their language to the things that are important to them.
Absolutely. So here's another question. So when you are a startup, a lot of VCs assume you need to have a well-defined ICP and be looking vertical. But in EdTech, often you're looking at a horizontal market, So, oops, that just gone down. So how do you create an ISP in a horizontal market? ICP, I suppose, in a horizontal market. I think we've kind of covered with what we've just discussed, right? So there is a decision maker, there is the executive, there is IT that you can't do anything without, and the end learner. So regardless of what kind of an offering, these four would remain constant, even when you go vertical specific, right? These four remain a constant. And there's an important point I'd like to just highlight, Chris. You mentioned about how these can also change as you progress with your offering, right? So many times what I've seen is we begin, but we don't I wouldn't use the word course correct, but we wouldn't check in, are these still our relevant ICPs, right? So it's very, especially in the startup world, so many things can sway, your offering, because one big customer comes in and then you're building for that big customer. You suddenly realize that what you had as ICPs is no more the case 2 months later, because there's big money to be won with that big deal, and you think the product or service can also do well if you continue targeting that ICP. So a constant relook, just to add, my 2 cents into it, is very important.
Can I add to that as well? Sorry, is also that you need to consider the external environment too. So, when we've started off in some regards, we thought that we were dealing with one particular set of problems, but then the education market is going through such a transformation, such a change at the moment, that there are new things that are coming up. Skills has very much come to the fore, through alternative credentials and things like that. So that's changed, and so when that changes, what new positions are opening up, what new areas are opening up that might be a better fit for your product than what you originally thought as well.
100%. I think positioning, there's this, let's move into the next topic. So positioning. Chris, so how do you identify yourself in the market? There's a similar question that we have coming up. So hopefully we can cover that here. How do you separate yourself from the noise of other solutions?
I think it's really important that you set your flag in the sand. If you are going to be promoting your brand and building your brand, you have to have a very clear picture of yourself and what you bring to the equation. Because everything after that then becomes easy, because everything then aligns to where you stand on things, the values that you have, what's important to you. Once you do that, then it's a matter of consistency. Being consistent with that message, being consistent visually as well. So it might be boring, but you are using your same logo, your same sort of suite of images. Please laughing, she knows. It's all about consistency.
Yeah.
So to do that, you need to really understand and have a strong sense of yourself. So write out your own brand and what's important, your mission statement, your values.
Lovely. Leah, could we add on?
100%. So yes, start there and do that, and be really true to who you are at that point and where you want to be as well. And it's not just the product that you have. The brand is everything. It's the service. It's the way you support your customers. It's how much you offer them after they purchase. And that could be very varied, again, depending on the tech that you have and the solution that you have. So all of those things go together to underpin what you represent as a brand and visually. The other things I would say are really think about how you're communicating that again. Make sure that it resonates with your personas that we were talking about earlier, because you can have the best brand and use it so consistently, but if your language or your approach doesn't resonate with who you want it to, the connection won't be there. And so it's really important to use language that education people will understand. And I'm not an educator, as you can tell, and so quite often I check my language, I check my approach, I make sure that it is the language that is going to resonate, because otherwise the translation's not there. One part's the visual, but the other part is the language that you use and how that's understood. So it's always good to question, especially if you're a techie person.
I love this. Both of you say something that's pretty close to my heart. So who are you? Right? First put that down, and yeah. So what's there are in between, competition that could be saying XYZ, the market environment that could be changing, maybe even governmental policies that are changing, right? But then
100%.
Yeah.
but then when you know who you are and what you offer, and you have that laid down, correct, then one of you said it makes everything easy. So your communication with respect to changing tides, whether it's policy, competition, blah, blah, it makes it easier for you to voice your opinion, say what you think about whatever is happening, and people just come to you, respect you for it, right? And answering that question, that really, cuts you away from the clutter that's out there. When you stand out and voice your opinion, it becomes easy when you clearly say who you are. Your team knows who you are. So when you voice it all out, that's when you start really differentiating yourself from the others who are silent, or from the others who are saying things which is not what they're doing. So I think it's all very brilliantly put, Chris, Leah, who you are. But sometimes, the other flip side to it is, not many people have those mission statements correctly put. Not many of us are able to articulate or even document, for that matter, right? So this is all when it gets very important, when you document things, when you share things, whatever your communication plan is. Remember, it's not just to the outside world, but it's also to internal. Every single hire you make, right? Every single policy that you're putting out in the team should be with respect to your mission statement and whoever you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the most visited pages on most websites that I've been involved with is the About Us. People want to know who you are. Yeah. It's, one of the first things they say is, well, you're saying this, who are you? And if you don't have that mission and values, your stake in the sand about what you believe and why you're there, then that makes all that much harder. If you have that fleshed out, it's worth doing that time at the initial instances. Usually when creating a new brand, you would do a brand and visual guidelines and I'm talking like mine go for like 40 pages, where everything is defined. You've got the logo representation, what font you're going to use, what color palette you're going to use, what, everything. And then once you've devised that, then you just adhere. That's it.
Perfect. Let's get into the next topic, which is hopefully more interesting than that mission statement, which is pitfalls in marketing. So, what are some common mistakes? Maybe I'll start with Leah. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah. What are some common mistakes? And it's not just from your experience here in EdTech. You can obviously also take up
Yes. Do you know what? A lot of them are actually very similar. So it can be overanalyzing, overthinking, not connecting with your customer. They're kind of really common things. You become disconnected, or you get too involved in a product or a development mindset, and you're not necessarily connecting with that customer. And so therefore what you're thinking doesn't eventuate. They're really kind of common things that I see across industries, especially in startups. But I think the bigger thing from a tech point of view is there's a passion and a desire to have the best tech and have all the latest things and have all the technology that is going to make everything really effective and really good. But you can do all that and still get no results if your branding isn't clear, your messaging isn't clear, you're not actually connecting your message with your customer. It doesn't matter how many times you hit them with emails or nurture programs, or how many different SEO words you stack into a page to make sure that you're going to get the Google referral. All those things don't matter if the message on the page doesn't resonate with your customer. And that's even nowadays, that's one of the things that I find, in growing companies, it's something that we need to constantly come back to is what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? And so we're working on a Google campaign, does the message that we are putting out there to that particular group of people actually connect with what they're going to see when they land on that page? And then as a result of that, are they going to have the action that I want, and are they going to connect with me? And so I would caution everybody to kind of start slow, focus on the basics, think about branding, think about messaging, and then build technology, build automation, but always make sure you're staying true to what we were talking about before, who you are and what your brand is, and how you're connecting with your customers.
Lovely. Thank you, Lee. I'm just putting out notes and just hitting send as well. Yeah, it's again, the core, the foundation, the fundamentals should be strong before you can really. I mean, if the message does not resonate, no matter how many millions you put into marketing, it's just going to be wasted. Chris, yourself.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more with what Lee was saying. We clearly are like-minded.
Yeah.
You don't need the flashiest thing. It's more important that your message hits the mark. So you need to fish where the fish are. It's better that you do a few things well rather than try and spread yourself too thin. People go on about Instagram. I'm not a fan of Instagram for any kind of sales focused thing that's outside of the fashion industry. But, that can suck your time, and all of it can suck your time. So you need to look at where your fish are. Where are your fish? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Facebook? Do they prefer email? And so you do have to be careful that you're not spreading yourself too thin and trying to be too much to too many people. To Lee's point, I love it that, the point that she made about starting small. It can be really disheartening, for example, if you're starting out with a content marketing strategy and you've got your first blog post, but there's only one there, and you think, who's going to read this? There's only one there. But the thing with marketing is it's about being consistent. It is consistency in everything that you do. So not just adhering to your brand, your messages and visual, but also doing the small things consistently. And if you do those small things consistently, you'll very quickly build up a library that you can then point to and say, here is my knowledge base, here is my expertise, here's those things that our brand believes in. And that in turn will help you. So just start small, don't get too distracted, I think the other point is about those personal relationships. Marketing is great, but when you're, a brand is still a brand until a person's associated with it. People want to do business with people, so you have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to be willing to put your face on things, because that's what people will respond to. People don't respond to a logo. They respond to you.
100%.
That is so true. And I think even more so in education, Christine. It's probably stronger in the education industry. The other thing I would say is, particularly in education, focus on building advocacy, because if you have that personal connection and you have your messaging right and you focus on building advocacy, your business will grow no matter what you're selling. So you need to, the simple things like that human connection and then sharing those stories is actually more effective than any sales pitch you could ever put out there.
Absolutely. People do business with people, and it's important to keep that in mind. Another thing that I think is really important is making sure that, once you have that foot in the door, we're all going to have a champion on our side that's going to help bring it through. Right? But they have to still communicate that with other people within the organization. We're talking about multiple layers, multiple people that have input or will need to get on board with this to make it a success. So you have to provision your champion with those things, those communication pieces, so that they can spread that word wider.
Lovely. Just because we're discussing pitfalls, while I was looking at this cohort, Sarah, if you don't mind, so while I was looking at the cohort and looking at their websites, I won't name, but one of them piqued my interest, and I did reach out, asking for early access, right? So I thought, I would get an immediate mail. I thought probably a passionate founder would be with me on the phone, because the phone number, I think I did pass on the phone number as well, but crickets, so I think, some of basics, right, is if you have an early customer or an early interest coming in, pick the phone. How did you hear about us, right? Talk to them. That's the thing, right? Talk to them, make them feel that, you really want, yes, to give them what they've asked for, but more importantly, to partner with them, make them as part of your journey moving forward, right? So no automation is going to, save you from that basic character of talking to people, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
what is that, sorry?
I was just saying, very much so, and especially as an early startup too, you want that time with your customer. You want that time with those interested parties. What is it that they're looking for? It's another opportunity to get customer insight, and the best place is from your customers. So, if this is someone that's reaching out, you've got to be responsive, and make sure that you have at least a, core system in place in how you're going to deal with those and pick those up quickly. And the phone is such an underrated tool. We all get emails, we all see all sorts of things, online, but don't forget the good old phone.
I think there's a question just from the core system. What digital platforms have you found to be most successful in reaching decision makers and influencers? Well, let me answer that one from my personal escapades. I think for me, especially, with what we're doing at Lead Squared, it's really been LinkedIn. So a lot of, inputs you get from LinkedIn, not just to be able to reach out to someone, but also to understand somebody, out there, right? So there's a lot of not just understanding, mapping, knowledge as well. Many times in the process of trying to understand, someone, I get to learn a lot, so just my interaction here with this, wonderful group of people, I'm learning lots. So LinkedIn, there are many people, who've just decided that they're going to be thought leaders, one fine day, but whether they become or not, they do share valuable, nuggets which you can learn from. So for me, it's been LinkedIn. Yourselves, in terms of most successful in reaching decision makers and influencers, Leah?
I would have to agree from a digital standpoint, LinkedIn. It's definitely our primary platform, and we do have other accounts, but we don't necessarily use them. A lot of the recommendations online we haven't found as effective. Actually, interestingly enough, most of our decision maker conversations don't come from digital platforms. They come from in-person connections. But if we are trying to reinforce that or start those connections, then LinkedIn would be our primary.
I agree.
Yeah, agreed. And especially with that last part that you said, that was one of the notes that I've made, is that, you've got to sort of think that it really is about the personal connections that you make, and it's the digital that backs that up, that provides 100%. That credibility and gives your voice more authority. So it's not that you are necessarily trying to pull a whole lot of leads. That's not going to happen, and especially not in education. When they want to get into something, then they'll do their research. But to hear about you in that first instance, the personal relationships really are still number one. LinkedIn for us, as a result, has definitely been the number one platform. I think, well, for us anyway, the YouTube has given us an opportunity to speak with other leaders in the education space, and be able to share that knowledge out there, so that, in our positioning, we've looked at becoming that thought leader and what that looks like. Video is such a great medium. If a picture says 1,000 words, what does a video say? So yeah, I think the combination of those two works very well. And then good old email. I mean, you sort of look at it, email still tracks,
Yeah, Chris, in fact, there was this great individual in my team. I'd always want him to go out to these events because he'd be brilliant with people. He'd represent the company so well. So, and we were all thinking, how do we scale this? We were thinking, how do we scale this? And there you go, video, right? So we had this individual do the video in all earnestness. So one-to-one personally, right? And just a minute, please. Sorry, the little girl coming. Yes, go. Sorry, Sarah. So yes, so this individual made videos one-on-one and a profound effect. You would not, because he was a natural at it, he needn't spend like half an hour to make a video. It was really just done in 5 minutes, right? And that, so personalization at scale with the best advocate in your team is very much possible. So I'd add that onto it as well. There's one question that's come which will actually make a good segue into our last topic. So if you have a product already in the market with traction, how would you find and attract an amazing head of marketing for your business? What would they seek and look for?
Leah, do you want to take that one?
Oh gosh, it's a hard world out there as far as recruitment goes at the moment. No matter what industry you're in. Look, in my experience, you're looking for someone who is comfortable working in a startup or in a startup environment. And so you need someone who is very self-driven, very motivated, really looking for personal challenge, and wants to own and drive growth. That's a very different marketer to what I would call a maintenance marketer, which is someone that just keeps things ticking in a really well-established brand. That said, I would suggest things like flexible workplace. All of those sorts of factors are very high on most marketers' lists. The ability to be independent, to really take and own the direction of a business will probably be really important to someone who is going to take on that role and be successful in a startup. So you're looking for a slightly different skill set to the average ad out there. You will get people through Seek. Networking and LinkedIn is probably one of the strongest ways. I would use your network of people as much as you possibly can. Where you're going to have key hires and key roles, try and build your network so that you can build your business and get the right people on board to help support you. But also recognize that the person at one point in time might be different to what you need in 5 years' time, because at this point, your business is going to change and grow rapidly. And not everyone will stay with a business forever. And so you need to focus on the right people at the right point in time for the place that your business is on in that journey. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was trying to think what I could add to that, but I think you've said it all perfectly.
Recruitment at the moment is very, very hard.
Oh, yeah. It is. But as you say, you have to look at those things that are going to appeal beyond what is out there. I think in someone with agility, they have to be able to wear multiple hats. 100%. They have to be be able to produce content on their own. Not all, marketing managers have got that skill still.
Yeah, you need to be hands-on, but also strategic. And it is becoming quite hard. Should I keep going, Sri, into the next topic? Because what I was going to say is one of the things that I've noticed, and again, in multiple organizations, multiple industries, is that people, roles, especially in marketing now, and I don't know if you've found this, Christine, but as they grow and as they build, they're becoming very specialized. So the bigger the organization, the more specialized. So, you have someone who just does AdWords. You have someone who is all about SEO. And I think one of the pitfalls that people can make when they are trying to grow a business is that they see that model in, you know, the big businesses that they aspire to, and yet they try and recreate it, but they're not in a position to actually have those specialists, because one of the problems with specialist skills is they can't do what the next person can do. And when you're small, you need to have much more flexibility, much more agility, and be able to spin and turn and adjust to not only what's going on in the market, but what's going on with your client base, what's going on within your business. So you need people who can wear multiple hats and do multiple things.
Let me add on, Leah. So this multiple hats, sorry to interject.
Go for it.
I saw, I actually not just saw, I met an individual who said they're hiring for director customer nurturing programs. And when this director was asked, you know, could you show us a nurturing email sequence? Director said, I'm still hiring my manager to do that sequence.
Yeah.
No, 100%, right? So we absolutely need to start with someone that understands various plays possible, maybe a few strengths, you know, 2 or 3 key strengths. You don't have to be, you know, in depth with all of them, but as long as you can appreciate that there are things like, you know, influence like analysts you have to run after, you know, there are things like partnerships that you have to, you know, make. So as long as this person's, you know, empathetic of the various routes of growth, sign them on, right? And then we can go deeper later on. And you just said this thing that I wanted to add on. It's not just, I mean, this can change. You don't just, you know, put out a VP marketing role there. You could say head of marketing, hey, dear friend, let's travel for the next 3 years together. Let's see how we go. You know, you do well, you can hire another head of marketing while you can step up to another role. So yeah, we need to, you know, create a 3-year or 5-year plan with these things.
I think the other element is the ability to fail fast. You know, the comfortableness with trying something doesn't go well. You got to pivot. You can't keep harping on with strategies that aren't working or things that aren't working. That can be hard to find in people. You know, most people don't want things to go wrong, but this is marketing. You know, you're going to try things that are not going to work. We've all, I think we can agree, had something fail spectacularly on us. And sometimes that's where the greatest learning is. So someone who is interested in learning as well, because the field of marketing, and especially in the education industry, is ever evolving.
Lovely. I think we are running out of time, but I continue to take notes. But maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. We should. Education. So head of marketing, thoughts on their education qualification / experience and how essential they are. Chris, maybe?
I would go for recent experience over past degrees. You know, if you're looking at someone who maybe, graduated with their Bachelor of Marketing, you know, 10 years ago, again, this is a very dynamic field. It's a very dynamic industry. Things are always changing. They need to be up to speed. And especially because you're looking for someone that can manage the technical and the strategic, they need to be able to have those technical skills in hand. So yeah, I think go for someone that has in some ways more practical experience.
Lovely. You want to add on to that, Leah?
I 100% agree. Experience over anything. The only thing I would say is experience in marketing and understanding branding and positioning, not experience in the tech world that you might be in or the education world, because those are brilliant skill sets. But marketing actually, even though everyone thinks they can do it, it is actually a unique skill set. And it is something that if you don't think that way, it can be a challenge and it's a learning process. So having that specific experience is important.
Yeah, totally agree.
There's this, you know, when we used to be hiring, something that we were very conscious of doing is, hey, we need to find people who just don't have that ego in the team, right? And then we said, how do you get that? I mean, maybe you do a few reference checks, but and then we actually got down to this, I'd go in for a game of foosball. I'm good at foosball. So we'd actually play a game of foosball, see how this person reacts to winning or losing, or maybe even a snide play, right? And seeing how they react, right? That was one. Another one was if individual loved singing or playing an instrument, and at right there, hey, could you play something for me, right? And individual said, sure, why not? And woke up, wanting to play, eager to play. That, hey, awesome person, team player, spirited. So some of hacks I'm just trying to get because of this question. It's been interesting. It's almost like going back to the days when I was there, building teams. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, it is fun. I think the other thing is, and to your point about how do you actually know this? So my hiring process is one that I actually got from a colleague of mine who was an HR manager at a very large hotel chain for 30 years. So I was very blessed to work alongside her for about 8 years there. So I got as much from her head as I could. But test what they're saying. There's nothing to say, okay, so you say that you can do this, and have them complete that in your office where possible, so that you can silently watch them from behind and just sort of see how they handle things. When people are confronted with a challenge, then, it's one thing for them to say, I know what I'm doing and here's my my history, but, put them on the spot and then see how they react to it, not just meet with them once, meet with them 3 times, have multiple opportunities to have that foosball game and, ask them to play instruments. So yeah, the more you get to know them and spend time on making the right hiring decision, we all know the statistics, and I'm sure we've all experienced it when there's been an inappropriate hire, and trying to get yourself out of that situation is much, much worse. As busy as you are, you have to make good, solid decisions that are based on the best evidence that you can get that this is going to be the right person for you.
100%.
Okay, guys. On that note, I think we'll bring closure to this conversation. It was a very great conversation, by the way. Thank you, Shrilesh, Christine, and Leah, for giving us your time and expertise. I hope you found you had enough time, and the conversation did sort of organically move through the topics. I think that you guys definitely covered all the points very well, and also introduced some new interesting points. It was great to hear about some more generalist marketing concept, as well as the characteristics that are unique to the EdTech sector. So, your attention, please. And as I'm sure you can hear, we've got a evacuation at the moment. Very poor timing for that one. I may have to pass on the next. I may have to pass on to Sarah to finish my sentence, and I'll have to evacuate.
All right, thanks,
Sorry about
Jonathan.
that, guys.
You're right, Jonathan. Thank you.
That was very exciting. I'm going to pin myself. There we go. With that, just so everyone knows, Jonathan is okay. We were worried that there might be an evacuation, but it was very poorly timed. With that will end the live feed for everyone watching from Slido. So everyone in Zoom, stay where you are. I'm going to wrap up the live feed for Slido. So thank you.